I felt his fingers before I saw them. Not mine. Hers. Under the table in the dim light of the restaurant, my husband's hand was wrapped around my sister's. His thumb moved slowly across her knuckles. Familiar, practiced, intimate. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. No one else noticed. Or maybe they had learned how not to. I turned my head slightly, not toward them, toward her husband. He was already looking at me, calm, steady, almost relieved. Then he smiled, and said quietly enough that only I could hear, "You weren't supposed to notice yet." Something inside my chest went completely still. Not shattered, not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when your body understands something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. I didn't pull my hand away from the table. I didn't drop my fork. I didn't look back down. I just sat there, breathing, watching, listening to the soft hum of conversations around us. The clink of glasses. The sound of a waiter placing a plate 2 tables over. Everything felt exactly the same, and completely different. I didn't react. That surprised even me. Because if you had asked me an hour earlier what I would do if I ever saw something like that, I would have said I'd stand up, walk out, say something sharp enough to leave a mark. But I didn't. I kept eating. That was the first decision I made that night. And it changed everything that came after. To understand why I stayed that calm, you have to understand the 4 of us. We weren't strangers. We weren't even just in-laws. We were intertwined. My name is Claire. I'm 41. I've been married to Daniel for 12 years. We live in a quiet neighborhood outside Richmond. 2-story house, white siding, a maple tree in the front yard that drops leaves too early every fall. No children, not by accident, just by the way life unfolded. I work in healthcare administration. Daniel works in commercial real estate. We built a stable life. Predictable, structured, the kind of life that looks solid from the outside. And most of the time, it was. My sister Emily is 3 years younger than me. She has always been easier in rooms, lighter, more fluid. The kind of person people remember after one conversation. Where I am careful, she is instinctive. Where I think, she reacts. Our parents used to say we balanced each other. What they meant was that Emily was easier to love out loud. She married Mark 8 years ago. Mark is the kind of man who listens more than he speaks. Measured, observant, kind in a way that doesn't need to be announced. He works in insurance risk analysis. Numbers, patterns, quiet decisions. The 4 of us had a rhythm, holidays together, birthdays, occasional dinners like this one. We were comfortable, familiar, safe, or at least I thought we were. The anniversary dinner had been my idea. 12 years of marriage. Nothing dramatic, just dinner. A place we had been to before. Soft lighting, dark wood tables, the kind of restaurant where people speak just a little more quietly than usual. I had worn a navy dress. Simple. Daniel had noticed. He always noticed small things like that. Or at least he used to. Emily arrived first. She hugged me tightly. "You look good," she said. "So do you." Mark followed a few steps behind her. Gave me a small nod. "Happy anniversary, thank you." Daniel came last. He kissed my cheek. "Traffic?" "Of course." We sat, ordered drinks, started with the kind of conversation that fills space easily. Work updates, a story about Emily's neighbor, a complaint about property taxes from Daniel. Mark listening. Occasionally adding something precise and dry that made Emily laugh. It felt normal. That was the most unsettling part. There were no warning signs, no raised voices, no awkward pauses. Just a smooth, practiced version of a family dinner. Until the moment under the table. After I saw it, I started noticing everything. Not dramatically, subtly. Emily's posture. The way she leaned slightly toward Daniel when she spoke. The way Daniel avoided looking directly at me for more than a second at a time. The timing of their responses. Too quick with each other, too careful with me. And Mark. Mark sat there with his usual stillness. Except now I understood it differently. He wasn't disengaged, He was aware, completely. I reached for my water. My hand didn't shake. That surprised me. I took a sip. Set the glass down. I'm glad we did this, I said. My voice sounded normal. That surprised me too. Emily smiled. Me too. Daniel nodded. Yeah. Mark didn't speak. He just watched. The waiter came by to clear plates, asked if we wanted dessert. Emily said yes. Daniel agreed. I said nothing. Mark shook his head. No dessert for me. His voice was even. Controlled. The waiter left. Emily turned to me. You're quiet. I'm thinking. About what I looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as my sister. As a person sitting across from me holding my husband's hand under the table. About how things change. She blinked. Change. Daniel shifted slightly in his chair. What do you mean I didn't answer? Because I wasn't ready to say it yet. And because I didn't need to. Not yet. Mark leaned back slightly. Then without looking at anyone else, he spoke. Claire. I turned to him. Yes, his eyes held mine, steady, unflinching. We should talk. Not now, not here. But soon. I nodded once. I know. Emily looked between us. What's going on? No one answered her. Because for the first time that night, she wasn't the one in control of the room. Dessert arrived. No one touched it. And under the table, no one moved their hands. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. That surprised me too. I lay awake beside Daniel listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. He fell asleep easily. He always did, even now. Even after that dinner. Even after everything that had shifted, even if he hadn't admitted it yet. I turned slightly toward him in the dark. His back was to me. That felt new. Not physically, emotionally. There's a difference. I watched the outline of his shoulder in the faint light from the window. 12 years. You don't measure a marriage in days. You measure it in patterns, morning routines, shared glances, the way someone reaches for you without thinking, the way they stop. That was the part I couldn't ignore anymore. He had stopped. Sometime before that dinner. Sometime before I noticed. And that realization didn't hurt the way I expected. It settled. Heavy. Clear. I turned back onto my side and closed my eyes. Not to sleep. Just to stop looking. The next morning I made coffee like I always did. Same mug, same amount of sugar, same quiet kitchen. Daniel came downstairs 15 minutes later. He kissed the top of my head. Morning, morning. His voice was normal, carefully normal. He poured himself coffee, stood across from me at the counter. We didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, dinner was a little strange. Yes. He nodded. Mark was acting off. I looked at him. Was he? Daniel met my eyes briefly, then looked away. Yeah. I didn't respond, because I wasn't going to help him construct a version of reality that protected him. He took a sip of coffee. Claire. Yes. He hesitated, then chose the easier path. Work might be busy today. I'll be late. Okay. That was it. No acknowledgement, no explanation. Just distance dressed up as routine. He left 10 minutes later. I stood in the kitchen for a while after the door closed. Then I picked up my phone. There was one message. From Mark. We should talk. Not at home. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back. When? The reply came quickly. Today, noon. There's a place near the courthouse. I read it twice. Courthouse. That detail didn't feel accidental. I'll be there. I set the phone down. Then I finished my coffee. Because even when everything shifts, some things still happen exactly the same way. The restaurant was quiet at noon. Mostly professionals, people in suits, short lunches, low voices, the kind of place where no one pays attention to anyone else. Mark was already there when I arrived. Same posture as always. Straight-backed, hands resting lightly on the table, a glass of water untouched in front of him. He stood when I approached. Thank you for coming. Of course. I sat across from him. Neither of us reached for a menu. We weren't there for lunch. For a moment we just looked at each other. Then he said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For the way you found out." I didn't answer. He continued. "I didn't want it to happen like that." "Then why did it?" He held my gaze, "Because I thought you deserved to see it." The honesty in that sentence landed differently than anything from the night before. Not kind, not cruel, just direct. I folded my hands on the table. How long he didn't pretend to misunderstand. 6 months. The number sat between us. 6 months, half a year, long enough to become a pattern, short enough to still feel like something that could have been stopped. "When did you know?" I asked. "About 2 months ago. And you didn't say anything?" "No." "Why?" He exhaled slowly. "Because if I told you, it would have been my version of the truth." I frowned slightly. "And what I saw last night, that was yours." I leaned back in my chair. "That's a very careful way of avoiding responsibility." He nodded once. "It is." Another pause. The waiter approached. We both shook our heads. "Not now." "Maybe not at all." Mark continued. "It didn't start the way you think." I almost smiled at that. That's usually how this part goes. I'm not defending it. "Then what are you doing?" He thought for a moment. "Trying to give you context." I didn't ask for context. "I know." Silence again. Then I asked the question that mattered. Did Emily love him? Mark didn't answer immediately. That told me more than anything else. "She believed she did," he said finally. "And him?" Mark looked down at the table briefly, then back at me. He was lonely. The word irritated me more than anger would have. Lonely? Yes. I shook my head slightly. "We live in the same house, I know. That's not loneliness. It can be." I didn't respond, because part of me understood what he meant, and I didn't want to yet. Mark continued. "You were busy with work, yes, and life, yes." I looked at him. "So the solution was my sister?" "No, that's what happened." "Yes." The simplicity of his agreement disarmed me. No excuses, no twisting, just acknowledgement. I leaned forward slightly. "Why tell me now?" He met my eyes. "Because you've already started seeing it. And if I hadn't," he didn't hesitate, "I would have told you eventually." "Why?" He paused. Then said quietly, "Because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life pretending not to know." That was the first time I saw the weight he had been carrying. Not as a victim, but as someone who had been standing in the middle of something broken for too long. I studied him. "You seem very calm about all of this." "I've had time." "I haven't." "I know." Another pause. Then he added, "I don't expect you to forgive anyone. I won't. I didn't think you would." I leaned back again. The room around us stayed quiet. People came and went. Conversations rose and fell. Normal life continued. And in the middle of it, mine had shifted into something else entirely. I picked up my bag. "I need time, of course." I stood, then hesitated. "One more question." He looked up. "Yes. Why did you say that last night? What you weren't supposed to notice yet?" He held my gaze. "Because they thought they had more time." I nodded once, then turned and walked out. I didn't go home right away. I drove. No destination, just movement. Somewhere between the courthouse and the river, I realized I wasn't trying to calm down. I was trying to organize. There's a difference. Calm is emotional. Organization is structural. And I have always been better with structure. I parked near a small park I used to visit years ago. Before the house. Before the routines that now felt like something I had been maintaining more than living in. I sat in the car for a while, hands resting on the steering wheel. Not gripping it. Just there. 6 months. That number kept returning. Not because of the time, because of what fits inside it. 6 months of dinners, conversations, shared space, small habits that I hadn't questioned, because I trusted the system I thought we had. That was the mistake. Not trusting him. Trusting the structure of us. I took out my phone, opened my messages with Daniel, scrolled. Nothing obvious. That was almost worse. No dramatic shifts, no sudden distance, just small changes. Response times. Tone. The absence of certain words. I didn't delete anything. I didn't take screenshots. I just read. Then I closed the app. Because the truth wasn't in the messages. It was in what I had seen, and what I now understood. I went home in the late afternoon. The house was quiet, exactly the way it always was at that hour. I set my bag down, took off my shoes, walked through each room slowly. Kitchen, living room, bedroom. Nothing had changed. That was the most unsettling part. Everything looked exactly the same, but the meaning of everything had shifted. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom. The bed was made. Daniel's side neat. Mine slightly less so. A detail I had never thought about before. Now it felt symbolic. I didn't stay there long. I went back downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. Not for him, for clarity. Around 6, my phone rang. Emily. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Hi. Her voice was too bright, too careful. Hey, how are you? I'm fine. A pause. About last night. Yes, I feel like something was off. I didn't respond. She continued. Mark was acting strange. Yes. And you were quiet. Yes. Another pause. I just wanted to check in. I leaned back in the chair. About what? About us? The word sat between us. Us. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them again. We should talk. Her voice softened. I'd like that. When tomorrow number a pause. Tonight. She hesitated. Okay, come here. Another pause. Should I bring Mark? No. Okay. We ended the call. I sat there for a moment longer. Then I stood up, moved through the house again, this time with intention, noticing details. Not emotionally, structurally. What belonged to me, what belonged to him, what belonged to us. That last category felt smaller than it had that morning. At 7, the front door opened. Daniel walked in. Same routine. Keys on the counter, shoes by the door. He looked at me. You're home early. Yes. He studied my face for a moment. Everything okay? I didn't answer right away. Then I said, we need to talk. His shoulders tightened slightly. About what? Sit down. He didn't argue. That was new. He sat across from me at the table, the same place I had been sitting for hours, waiting. I folded my hands, looked at him. 6 months. He didn't ask what I meant. That told me everything. His eyes dropped to the table, then back to me. Yes. No denial, no confusion, just acceptance. I nodded once. Thank you for not lying. He exhaled slowly. I didn't think I could. Another pause. Does Emily love you? I asked. He looked surprised by the question. I think she believes she does. And you? He hesitated. Then answered carefully. I cared about her. Cared. Past tense. I registered that. Do you love me? I asked. That question changed something in the room. He looked at me for a long time, long enough that I understood the answer before he spoke. Yes. The word felt complicated. Not false, not complete, just insufficient. I nodded slowly. Okay. He leaned forward slightly. Claire. No. I raised my hand slightly. Not dramatic. Just enough. We're not doing that part yet. What part? The explanation. He sat back. Okay. I held his gaze. I'm not interested in why. He looked confused. You're not? No. Why not? Because it won't change what happened. Silence. Then he asked quietly, what are you interested in? I took a breath. Truth. He nodded. You have it? Yes. Another pause. Then I said something that surprised even me. Emily is coming over tonight. His head lifted. Why? Because this conversation isn't finished. He leaned back slowly. This is going to be bad. Yes. The doorbell rang. Neither of us moved right away. Then I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Emily stood there, alone. Emily stepped inside like she had walked into the wrong house. Not physically. Everything was familiar. The hallway, the light switch she always missed on the first try, the faint smell of lemon cleaner I used every Sunday. But something in her posture had changed. Her shoulders were slightly raised, her movements careful, measured, like she was trying not to disturb something already fragile. Hi, she said. Hi, I stepped aside. She walked in. Her eyes moved past me immediately, toward the kitchen. She saw Daniel. He was still sitting at the table, exactly where I had left him. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just watched. Emily's breath caught slightly. Then she recovered. Too quickly. Hey, she said to him. Hey. The word landed flat. No warmth, no familiarity, just acknowledgement. I closed the door behind her. The sound felt louder than it should have. We moved into the kitchen. 3 chairs, 3 people, no one sitting yet. Emily looked between us. What's going on? I pulled out a chair and sat. Then I looked at her. You already know. She blinked. I don't. Yes, you do. Daniel exhaled slowly. Emily glanced at him, then back at me. I think you're misunderstanding something. I didn't answer. I just watched her. That was enough. Her posture shifted again. Not defensive, not yet, but aware, careful. Daniel finally spoke. Emily. She turned toward him. Don't, he said. That word stopped her. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down slowly. Across from me. We stayed like that for a few seconds. No one rushing. No one filling the silence. Then I said, 6 months. Her eyes flickered. Just once. That was enough. I didn't plan for you to find out like this, she said quietly. I almost smiled. That seems to be a theme. She looked down at her hands, then back up. I was going to tell you. When she hesitated. I don't know. That's not an answer. I needed time. For what to figure things out. I leaned forward slightly, while you were holding my husband's hand under the table. She flinched. Not dramatically. Just enough. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Emily swallowed. It wasn't supposed to get this far. That sentence settled heavily in the room. Not because it explained anything. Because it revealed something. I sat back. How far did you think it would go? She didn't answer. Daniel did. We didn't think. I looked at him. That's not true. He met my eyes. You're right. Then what did you think? He paused, then said quietly, We thought we had more time. The same phrase Mark had used. I registered that. Not as coincidence, as confirmation. Emily's voice softened. It didn't start the way you think. I shook my head slightly. I don't need that sentence again. She pressed her lips together. Then tried a different approach. You were distant. There it was. I felt it land. Not as an accusation. As a justification. I was working, I said. I know. I was managing things. I know. Living our life. I know. I held her gaze. And that gave you permission. She shook her head quickly. No. Then what did it give you? She didn't answer. Because there was no version of that answer that would make sense out loud. Daniel spoke again. It wasn't about replacing you. I looked at him. Then what was it about? He hesitated. Then said ease. The word hung in the air. Emily closed her eyes briefly. I leaned back in my chair. Ease. Daniel nodded. It was simpler. Then what he struggled for a moment. Then everything else. I let that sit, because I understood it, and I didn't like that I understood it. Emily spoke again. I didn't plan to hurt you. I looked at her. You did. She nodded slowly. I know. Silence. Longer this time. Then I said something that changed the direction of the room. I'm not angry. Both of them looked at me. Surprised. Emily blinked. You're not... No. Daniel frowned. Then what are you? I thought about it. Then answered honestly. Clear. That word landed differently. Emily leaned forward slightly. What does that mean? It means I understand exactly what happened. And I understand what happens next. Daniel's shoulders tightened. What happens next? I reached down slowly, slid my wedding ring off my finger, set it on the table. The sound was soft, but final. Emily stared at it. Daniel didn't move. I'm not leaving because you cheated, I said. My voice stayed calm, even, measured. I'm leaving because you thought I wouldn't see it clearly. Emily's breath caught. Daniel looked at the ring, then back at me. Claire! I stood. The chair moved slightly against the floor. I'm not going to argue, I said. I'm not going to ask why. I looked at both of them. I'm just going to step out of something that doesn't exist anymore. No one stopped me. No one followed. I walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, into the bedroom, and closed the door. The first thing I did after closing the bedroom door was sit on the floor, not on the bed, not at the vanity. On the floor beside the closet where the carpet still held the faint indentation from a chair we had moved years ago and never replaced. There are moments when standing feels too formal for what your life has become. So I sat. Downstairs I could hear almost nothing. Not voices, not footsteps. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling around itself. It struck me then that the house was doing what houses always do. Continuing. No matter what the people inside them are losing. I stayed there for several minutes, maybe longer. Time changes shape when a marriage ends quietly. There was no slammed door, no broken glass, no screaming. Just one ring placed on a kitchen table, and the sudden knowledge that everything after this would require a different version of me. Eventually I stood, opened the closet, and took out the overnight bag I had once packed for a conference in Baltimore. Black canvas, small, practical. I set it on the bed and began folding things into it with the same calm I used when organizing spreadsheets or insurance files or treatment schedules for hospitals that had lost track of their own staff. 2 pairs of pants, 3 blouses, toothbrush, skincare bag, phone charger, underwear, a navy cardigan, no photos, no jewelry, no sentimental objects. That wasn't restraint, it was instinct. I wasn't leaving my life. I was creating enough distance to see it. By the time I zipped the bag, there was a soft knock at the door. Not Daniel, Emily. I knew before she spoke. Claire. I walked to the door but didn't open it. Yes, a pause. Then, can we talk? We already did. Another pause. I mean, just us. I rested my hand lightly against the doorknob. No, please. I closed my eyes briefly. Not from pain, from fatigue. No, Emily. Her voice lowered. I'm sorry. I believed that she felt something that resembled sorrow. What I didn't believe was that sorrow had arrived in time to matter. I know, I said. That's not enough. She didn't answer. After a few seconds, I heard her footsteps move away. Another minute passed, then a second knock. Daniel this time. I didn't open the door either. Claire. Yes, where are you going? That's not your question to ask anymore. Silence. Then, are you staying with Laura? Probably. My friend Laura lived 20 minutes away, and had once told me after her own divorce that every woman should keep one person in her life who could take a midnight phone call without asking too many questions. Yes, I said. Another silence. Then he asked, Can we talk tomorrow about what I heard him exhale? Practical things. That at least was honest. Yes, I said. Tomorrow. He didn't speak again. I waited until the hallway was quiet before opening the door. The upstairs landing was empty. I took my bag, walked down the stairs, and found the kitchen exactly the way I had left it. Emily was gone. Daniel stood by the sink with both hands braced against the counter looking down. He turned when he heard me. I didn't stop walking. He moved aside as I passed. That was new too. Not the movement, the awareness underneath it. At the front door, I slipped my shoes on and reached for my coat. Claire. I looked at him. Nothing in his face was theatrical. No tears, no collapse. Just a man standing in a kitchen he no longer understood. You don't have to do this tonight. Yes, I said. I do. He nodded once, like he knew better than to argue with that. Then he said something quiet enough that I almost missed it. I never wanted to humiliate you. I opened the door. You should have thought about that earlier. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. I walked to my car, put the bag in the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. The porch light stayed on. He didn't come outside. That was good. Some endings do not need witnesses. Laura opened her apartment door before I knocked. She looked at the bag in my hand, then at my face, and simply stepped aside. No questions, no noise. The apartment smelled like tomato soup and laundry detergent, comforting in a very adult, very unsentimental way. She took my bag and set it near the couch. I made tea, she said. Of course you did, I assumed. I sat at her kitchen table while she poured hot water into 2 mugs. She placed one in front of me, then sat down across from me and folded her hands. She was waiting. I took 1 sip, then another. Finally, I said Daniel and Emily. Her face changed slowly. Not shock, recognition. As if some part of her had already suspected that if betrayal ever came for me, it would not arrive in a simple shape. Oh, Claire, I nodded once. At our anniversary dinner. She leaned back in her chair. Does Mark know? Yes. And he knew. That was the sentence that finally hurt enough to make me look away. Not because of Mark specifically, because there had been a whole second layer of knowledge moving around me while I sat inside my own marriage, thinking the room was arranged one way when it had already been rearranged without me. Laura's voice softened. You don't have to decide everything tonight. I know. Then what do you have to decide? I thought about that. Then answered. What belongs to me? She nodded. Good. The next morning I met Daniel at a coffee shop near his office. Neutral space, hard chairs, mediocre espresso. The kind of place where you can say difficult things quietly because everyone around you is pretending not to listen. He was already there when I arrived. No ring on his hand. Mine was still in my purse wrapped in a receipt from the gas station. He stood when he saw me. I sat down before he could say anything. We need to talk about the house, he said. Of course we did. The mortgage, the accounts, the practical architecture of a life built jointly and now needing to be dismantled with care. We will, I said. He nodded. Then he pushed a folder across the table. Bank statements, retirement summaries, property documents, everything organized. That almost made me laugh. Of course he had organized the damage. I opened the folder slowly. He watched my face. What he asked? I'm just noticing how prepared you are. He looked down. I had time. Yes, I said. I know. We divided the house in numbers first. That felt easier. Mortgage balance, equity, accounts, retirement contributions. Things that could be measured, assigned, separated. Daniel had done most of the work already. Spreadsheets, columns, clean lines. He slid the papers toward me one by one, explaining what I already understood. I listened. Not because I needed the information, because I needed to see how he handled this part. This version of responsibility. Everything is split evenly, he said. I made sure of that. I nodded. I can see that. You can keep the house if you want. I looked at him. Why would I want it? He didn't answer, because he knew the answer. The house wasn't a structure anymore. It was context. And the context had changed. I'll sell, I said. That's fair. We moved through the rest quickly. Insurance, joint accounts, utilities, all the small systems that keep a shared life functioning. One by one we separated them. There was no argument, no negotiation, just a quiet dismantling. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. "That's everything." "No," I said. "It isn't." He looked at me. "What else, Emily?" His expression shifted. "That's not something we can divide. I'm not trying to." "Then what are you doing? I'm deciding what she is to me now." He held my gaze. And I took a breath. She isn't my sister in the way she was. He nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," I said. "You don't." He flinched slightly. "Then explain it. It's not about anger." "Then what is it about?" "It's about trust." He looked down at the table. "That's fair." I studied him for a moment. "You're not defending her." "No." "Why not?" He hesitated, then answered quietly, "Because I don't respect what we did." The phrasing mattered. Not just what he said, how he said it. I nodded once. "That's the first honest thing you've said that sounds complete." He didn't respond. We sat there for a moment longer. Then I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. "You should keep copies." "I have them." "Of course you do." A small pause. Then I stood. He didn't try to stop me. At the door he said, "Claire." I turned. "Yes, I'm sorry. This time it sounded different. Not careful, not structured, just tired." I nodded. "I know." And then I left. Emily called 3 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. She left one message, then another. The third was just silence, and a breath before the line disconnected. I listened to all 3, then deleted them, not out of anger, out of clarity. That evening, Laura came home later than usual. She found me sitting at her kitchen table again, a notebook open in front of me. Not writing, just looking. "You're making lists," she said. "Yes. Of what stays, and what goes." She set her bag down and poured herself a glass of water. "Where does your sister fall gone?" Laura nodded slowly. "Clean lines." "Yes. Hard ones." "Yes." She sat across from me. "Do you feel lighter?" I thought about that. "No." "Do you feel heavier?" "No." "Then what do you feel?" "Accurate." She smiled slightly. "That's a good place to start." Across town things were not settling as cleanly. I knew that without being told, because patterns don't disappear. They shift. Emily showed up at our parents' house the next morning, unannounced. Our mother answered the door, surprised, concerned. "Emily." "What's wrong?" Emily stepped inside, tried to speak, didn't. Our father came into the hallway. "What's going on?" Emily looked between them. Then said it all at once. "I need help." They didn't understand yet, not fully, but they understood enough. "What happened?" our mother asked. Emily's voice shook slightly. "Claire knows. That changed everything." Our mother's face went still. Our father's expression hardened. Knew what Emily swallowed. About Daniel. Silence. Longer than the one at my anniversary dinner, different, heavier. Our father spoke first. "You and your sister's husband." "Yes." He nodded once, then turned away. Not in anger, in disappointment. Our mother sat down slowly. "How long?" 6 months. Another silence. Then our father said something that would follow Emily for a long time. "You broke something you don't get to fix." Emily didn't argue, because she knew it was true. Later that week, Mark filed for separation, quietly, without confrontation, without discussion, just paperwork, structured, clean. The way people end things when they've already been living outside them for too long. Emily called me again after that. I didn't answer. She came to Laura's apartment once, stood outside the door, knocked twice, waited. I stood on the other side of that door, close enough to hear her breathing, but I didn't open it. After a minute she said my name, softly. "Claire." I didn't answer. She waited a little longer. Then her footsteps moved away. That was the last time I saw her that month. And for the first time since that dinner, The silence felt like something I had chosen. A month later, I signed the final documents in a small legal office that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Neutral space again. No history, no memory, just signatures, dates, and the quiet understanding that something had ended in a way that would not reverse itself. The attorney slid the last page toward me. Initial here. I did. Date here. I wrote it carefully. Not rushed, not delayed, just finished. When it was done, she gathered the papers into a neat stack. You'll receive certified copies within the week. Thank you. She smiled politely. Professional. Distant. The kind of smile that belongs to someone who witnesses endings every day and no longer treats them as extraordinary. Outside, the sky was overcast. Not dramatic, just gray. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, holding my coat closed against the wind. There was no surge of emotion, no sense of victory, no collapse, just a quiet, steady awareness. I had my life back. Not the version I had built, the version I had not yet defined. That afternoon, I went to the house one last time. Daniel had already moved most of his things out. Boxes lined the hallway. The living room felt larger, emptier. Less like a place people lived and more like a space waiting to be reassigned. I walked through each room slowly. Not to remember, to acknowledge. The kitchen, the dining room, the bedroom, each one held pieces of a version of me that had been real, and then had stopped being real. In the bedroom, I opened the closet. My side was already mostly empty. A few hangers remained. One scarf I had forgotten. I took it down, folded it, and placed it in my bag. No hesitation, no second thought, just completion. Downstairs, Daniel stood near the back door. He looked up when he heard me. "You're here." "Yes." "I didn't know when you'd come back. I said I would." He nodded. "I remember." We stood there for a moment. Two people who had once known each other's rhythms without speaking, now needing words for everything. "I left the paperwork on the counter," he said. I saw. "Is there anything else you need?" I thought about that. Then shook my head. "No." He looked like he wanted to say something else, then didn't. Instead, he stepped aside, giving me space to move. I walked to the front door, paused. Not because I was unsure, because I wanted to be precise about the moment. I turned back once. "Daniel." "Yes, I don't hate you." He closed his eyes briefly. "I know. That doesn't mean I forgive you." He nodded. "I know that too." I opened the door, and this time I didn't look back again. Emily didn't call after that. Not once, not twice, not at all. The silence between us settled into something permanent. Not fragile, not temporary. Just complete. Months passed. Not dramatically, just steadily. Work resumed its rhythm. Mornings, meetings, deadlines, conversations that required focus, decisions that had nothing to do with my personal life. That helped, not as an escape, as a recalibration. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to the office. Clean lines, minimal furniture, intentional choices. Everything in that space belonged to me, not to a shared story, to a current one. Laura came over one evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on the floor eating from containers because I hadn't bought a dining table yet. "You seem different," she said. "I am. How I don't explain myself as much." She smiled. "That's progress." I considered that. Then said, "It feels like accuracy." She raised her glass slightly. "To accuracy." We drank. Later that night after she left, I stood by the window and looked out over the street. Cars passing, people walking. Normal life continuing. The same way it had the night everything changed. The difference was, I was no longer waiting for something to interrupt it. I was inside it again. Fully, without distortion, without assumption, just present. And that was enough. If you've ever sat at a table and realized something important had already broken, if you've ever stayed quiet long enough to hear the truth underneath people's words, if you've ever chosen clarity over comfort, Then you understand this. Not every ending needs noise. Not every betrayal needs revenge. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is see clearly and walk away clean.